Good morning, everybody. Welcome to session 2 of our Beyond Collaboration series, Business Process Management as the Backbone of Collaboration, Efficiency and Performance. Because we do want you to collaborate with us, please participate in the polls and ask questions, which we will get to at the end of the webinar in the Q&A session. In our last session, we focused on organizational intelligence and cohesive integration, being truly able to depend on and trust your teams, especially when we have to work remotely and feel as though we have less control over outcomes than ever before. We need to foster an ethos of goal-directed action, which is actually implemented at lower levels in organizations. The need for integrated collaboration has become crucial for harmonious flow of processes, sustainability, and success. While we are all embarking on the digitalisation journey, it's easy to forget that without the correct processes in place, all digitalisation will do for you is speed up the chaos. What supports real progress is a strong framework built around the backbone of effective business process management. I'm going to show you a short video and then hand over to Dilly Naidu, CEO of Madala & Associates, who will be managing our program today.
Team's job is to churn out sexy-looking media that drives real results on time and on budget. However, the creative work management process can easily become more like chaotic death metal than harmoniously sweet symphony. It all starts out innocently enough. A VP from upstairs requests a microsite for a new brand awareness campaign, and she wants it yesterday. Then, a mass of additional work requests come flooding in via sticky notes, emails from the boss, chats in the hallway, paper airplanes from the dude 3 rows over, making projects next to impossible to prioritize. And naturally, everybody thinks their request should be your top priority. As a result, everyone on your team starts working on different things instead of the most important work. Then you're left trying to track all of your team's work by switching back and forth between 8 different tools like whiteboards and endless mounds of spreadsheets, outdated schedules and calendars, task management apps, never-ending meetings, stacks of file folders, which makes getting reliable status updates and data like pulling teeth. Visibility becomes a joke because nobody knows what in the world is going on. Communication is scattered across mile-long email chains, weeks of instant messages, phone conversations that no one seems to remember, smoke signals in the sky, or Morse code messages that take a month to decipher. Approval processes take 70 years to complete. Deadlines start getting missed. You've taken to drinking copious amounts of caffeine before 8:30 in the morning. You don't get home until well after the sun goes down, and the only thing left to do is laugh just to keep from crying. Breathe. There is a solution to all this madness.
Good morning, everyone, and I trust that you all had a great extended weekend, which was Women's Day, and I trust that all the hardworking women, the women that we cherish, that have had a blissful, special day over the weekend. As Caroline mentioned, this is the second in our series of Beyond Collaboration. We have deliberately chosen the theme Beyond Collaboration because most of you during lockdown have been on various media in terms of just having video conversations. But what happens beyond that conversations in the organization as far as automation, digitalization, and integration is concerned? Just to cast our minds back, if we remember the first session, we talked about leadership, which is largely based on IQ, and there was a need for more emotional quotient, better understanding and relating to people, And we introduced a new terminology called OI, which stood for Organization Integration. Today we have two world-class speakers, and I will introduce our first speaker, which is Mike Smith. Mike is a senior business consultant at Rifle Shot Performance Holding, commonly known as RSPH. In our organization, we call so-called consultants resultants because they are results-driven. Mike has had over 45 years of business as well as IT experience. He's focused a lot in the areas of compliance like ISO and the various variants of ISO and other compliances. Also, a champion of quality systems and process systems. Today, Mike is going to be talking to you about why they need for business process management. And as the previous video illustrated, I'm sure a number of you have had those kind of experiences, which ultimately causes a lot of stress within the organization. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Mike Smith.
Thank you, Dilly, and good morning, everybody. The subject of this webinar is about business process management, or BPM, being the backbone for collaboration, efficiency, and performance. But before I get on to discussing BPM, I want to talk a little bit about digitalization. And the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what do we mean by digitalization? Sorry, there's something that's gone slightly wrong there. What do we mean by digitalization? Many definitions abound according to who you are, the environment you're working in, and what you hope to achieve by digitalization. But basically, digitalization just means putting stuff on a computer. So let's play a little game with some rhetorical questions. Is using a processor, a word processor on a laptop, digitalization? Is sending a document via email digitalization? What if the recipient doesn't have email? Then we have to print the document onto paper and send to his fax machine. If some of you don't know what a fax machine is, by the way, ask someone older than yourself. But seriously, this still begs the question, does this count as digitalization? Some would say that going paperless is the essence of digitalization. Others might say that using a document sharing app such as SharePoint is the ultimate in digitalization. Can you see where I'm going with this? The point I'm trying to make is that digitalization means different things to different people. So we can't be prescriptive when it comes to defining digitalization. So where are you in your digitalization journey? And at this point, I'm going to ask Caroline to open up a little poll. Our first question is, where are we with respect to digitalization? Caroline, can we see the poll?
Mike, results are in. 25% of our audience says not started yet, and 75% are in process.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So the next question, and Caroline will also cue a poll for, is this: how satisfied, this is obviously for those who have started their digitalization journey, how satisfied are we with the outcomes so far? And I'll give you a few seconds to conduct that poll, and then Caroline will tell us what the results are.
Mike,
Yep.
we have 87% partly satisfied and 11% fully satisfied. Sorry, the poll is changing as we're speaking. We have 70% partly satisfied, 20% not satisfied at all, and 10% fully satisfied.
Great. Super. Thank you, guys and girls. And the next statement digitalisation just creates chaos faster. Do you disagree, partly agree, or totally agree?
Okay, that was quick. %25 disagree. Well, we're changing, it's sliding. Okay, 30% disagree, 50% partly agree, and 20% fully agree.
Okay, so what this is telling us is at the moment is the journey towards digitalization is, let's say, it looks like it's a little bit bumpy for most people. And this isn't surprising. And we'll look at some of the reasons maybe. So the next thing I want to discuss is, what are we trying to digitize? And I've put up a few items there that are the usual suspects. People have to start somewhere, and every organization has its own priorities when it comes to what they need to digitize. Now, perhaps the most important aspect which we should be considering when tackling digitization is the why. Why do we want to digitize something in the first place? What are we trying to achieve? What are the deliverables? What are the benefits? What is the value? And if you can't provide answers to these basic questions, then you're probably about to waste a lot of time, money, and effort. Or maybe digitalization is being forced on you by having to comply with a certain set of standards or requirements. And we're going to open up a poll just now for those organizations which have to comply with standards or regulations. How many standards or regulations does your company have to comply with? Over to you, Caroline.
The poll is open. Mike, we have 100% answering several. There's some changes happening, just a sec. Okay, we have 9% answering none, 9% answering at least one, and 81% answering several.
Okay, thanks again for that. This is very important because, like it or not, organizations have to exist in an environment which, for many, many years, this is not a new thing, but regulations, in fact, we've got to the stage where some regulations and standards are becoming enforceable by law. So this is not, oh, do we really have to do this? It's becoming mandatory, and it's becoming critical to the ability of businesses to do business. So we've looked at the what and why of digitalization. So where do processes fit in? Caroline, just a bit of guidance here. I'm seeing a slide which is all portraying everything at once. Can I not display the parts in this slide separately?
No, not on this platform.
Okay, all right. Then I must apologize to everybody. These slides were supposed to be steps of displaying various things. So I'm going to have to read out what you're actually seeing there. So The majority of standards refer to organizations taking a process-based approach in managing their activities. And there's some black writing there, which gives a definition of what a process is. And it goes something along the lines of any set of activities that, actually, I can't read it, so sorry, guys. But then they go on to say, what do they mean by a process-based approach? And again, this isn't new. This started back in the 1990s. Some people would say maybe even further, but they didn't give it a name. But essentially, the process-based approach is the systematic identification and management of the processes. Now, I stress systematic identification. This is sitting down and systematizing the processes. So you give them names, you give them identities, you have a taxonomy, and then managing those processes. And I stress at a high level. I'll come back to that just now. And we're talking about processes employed within an organization. They don't say operational processes only. They don't say transactional processes. They're talking throughout an organization. And very important, the interactions between the processes. This is what they mean by the process approach. And again, this isn't new. And a key element there is interactions between processes. So this is going to obviously push us into, we'll discuss it just now, the realms of integrating processes. So when one is looking at trying to define and integrate processes in an organization, we should preferably start with an overview of the main groups of processes that an organization needs to carry out to fulfill its missions and goals, whatever that might be. And note that we're talking about high-level processes. We're talking about business management, not BPM as a tool. Just digitizing lower-level processes doesn't make them right. You've all heard of the expression garbage in, garbage out. So embarking on digitalisation spree without first performing due diligence on those traditional processes may still just produce garbage, just now in a digital form. Likewise, the arbitrary use of BPM tools and robots doesn't magically make the processes right. And with the greatest of respect to the skills of the many BPM and RPA practitioners out there, the use of BPM tools in themselves should not be confused with the higher level goals of corporate management in managing their business processes. And by managing, I mean the defining, controlling, executing, monitoring, measuring, and improving their business processes in relation to their business needs and requirements. Business process management, and I read that out in full, not abbreviated, business process management needs to start at the top with a corporate mission statement accompanied by goals, policies, and strategies. Once macro processes are defined, lower level processes can be investigated, including what the process inputs are on the left, which are usually the outputs of a preceding process, and what the outputs need to be in order to supply the next process in the chain. This then enables us to determine what activities, tasks, documents, checklists, and resources include inputs into outputs. Only now are we really in a position to start digitizing the process. You may have noticed that this slide is the same as the previous one. If I go back, right. All that has changed is the title. This is because I want to make the point that on the surface, it's the same. But this second slide actually now represents a series of activities, each of which can now have a set of metadata, sub-processes, activities, tasks, documents, checklists, resources, etc., associated with it. In fact, there could be no limit to the scope and depth of these associations, and the many ways they might depend upon and have to interact with other processes. How this level of integration can be achieved will be addressed later on by Jesse in his presentation. So why do we want to digitize stuff? What are the benefits? Standardization obviously is very useful. Everybody is singing off the same song sheet. Processes can be centralized in a central application or repository and controlled like documents. So only the correct versions of processes actually get distributed and disseminated and used. The publication of those processes, the use of them provides consistency in executing the processes, consistency in executing the business processes. Furthermore, these processes can now be measured. One can associate KPIs and KPAs. So we can measure the performance of the process. How well are we doing? Are we achieving our goals and objectives? It also allows to review these processes on an ongoing basis, so that if necessary, we can improve them. So going back to the original title of the set of seminars, why beyond collaboration? So here we have an orchestra, and one would assume that these guys are all in the same room. They have a conductor. They all have the same sheet music in front of them. So this should sound quite nice. So Caroline, here we go. Okay, not exactly what we would have expected. So why do we talk about beyond collaboration? Well, a lot of talk is going on at the moment about ways of collaborating with our colleagues during the COVID-19 pandemic. Even before lockdown, were people actually collaborating? Do applications such as email, Skype, Teams, Zooms, etc. necessarily allow for collaboration? No. Like a good orchestra, if an organization is to function harmoniously, efficiently, and productively, it needs to get its act together. And like the members of an orchestra, each with their own instrument, the various functions and discipline in an organization need to be able to communicate and work with one another and play from the same song sheet to achieve their shared objectives. It also requires integration, not just horizontally in the operational layer, but vertically between the transactional and corporate management layers. This hopefully should result in a unified workplace that embraces the whole organization. The elimination of silos that processes can permeate throughout the entire organization, and ensuring that processes are connected and complementary, allowing people to have access to the same information in real time, and preventing people independently reinventing the wheel. The use of digital workflows also helps us eliminate paper-based communication and delays. Ideally, this should result in a reduction of costs, improved performance, satisfied customers, profitability, sustainability, and so on. So, some recommendations to take away. Decide what you want to digitize and why. Create a process development plan. Use a top-down approach. Very important, involve all stakeholders. Use a bottom-up process design. Validate inputs and outputs, and that process is talking to one another correctly. Review and approve the processes like you would any document. Apply workflow automation if and as when required. And very important, monitor implementation. How are we doing? Review based on the results of monitoring and improve where necessary. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing from Jessie as how we can go about and make all of this happen.
Thank you, Mike. Mike shared with you the symphony orchestra that was totally out of sync. Other than business, Mike is also a guitar player. And I've listened to Mike and his colleagues, and I can tell you, with all the practice and the processes that they have, they make sweet music. Mike also rides fast bikes, fast cars, and planes. Mike, so thank you very much for that in terms of why we should be looking at business process management and the digitalization guidelines that you've provided. Our next speaker is Jessie Hoegen. Jessie hails from Brazil and has several years of business experience. Jessie is currently an executive with SoftExpert, and he is moved to manage the Europe, Middle East, and Africa operation based in Liverpool in the UK. We have spent many years at Rifle Shot with Jessie and his team, and I can confess that Jessie is really a global expert as far as business on the one side, right from strategy to where the rubber meets the road within the lower levels of the organization. In Jessie's spare time, he also loves reading, studying, playing chess, as well as playing the guitar. So Jessie, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Dilly, for the kind words. And thank you for everybody for participating in this webinar. It's really amazing to show the many possibilities when you have a orchestra working properly. And Caroline, can you set my slides, please? Okay, thank you. So you can't play a symphony alone. It takes an orchestra to play it. So that's truly for the business. So it's really true for applying on the business sense. So how can you make a company that made up with many different people, many different systems, areas, and also external customers and suppliers? How do you orchestrate all those different people and different subjects inside of the organization? The BPM discipline or the BPM knowledge area comes to help organization to solve that problem. So one thing is to describe the process. So first thing, you need to understand your process, because first, to play well, you need to know every participant, which one plays, what type of instrument he's best on, and we have to have a proper time, a synchronization between the different players. So the same way you can look at the process. So how can we make the business work as a symphony? I introduce you to a process that's I'm being very acquainted with it. It's a submit sales orders. Let me explain you the background of this process. So as a software company, we have thousands of customers and we have a lot of solutions and components that we sell. So normally the sales process is very complex because it depends on many areas to be very articulated, very orchestrated. So when we submit a new sales order, many things have to happen. Some on this, you follow a sequential step, and some that have to happen in parallel, in concurrent way. How can we orchestrate that? So before to have the automation of that, sometimes from the submit sales order, so when the order got to the company, until which implementation takes like 30 days or 45 days. In average, 35 days from the submit sales orders and the beginning of the implementation. There is several steps on this process. So what we did to improve it, first we need to know the process. So the first step we did, we automate the process. Oh, sorry, we describe the process and we map the process as the first step. And as a second step, we automate it. So we reduced the lead time from basically 35 days in average to 15 days. So it was a really big improvement on the submit sales order. So in the end, we want to have the customer happy. So if they start the business, start the sales order, and in 15 days we start the implementation, that was really good time, and customer get really satisfied with that. This process has to start when the salesperson submit that sales order. But just to have an idea of the complexity of this, because when we sell our solution, we can sell on cloud or on premises. That means it's two different types of selling. We have several components that can be bought by the customer. So we have to define every customer and the implementation scope. So we need to check the financial aspect of this sales order. We need to check the implementation of it. We need to make the environment to be available. We need to have the project in place to plan the implementation. So in total, we have more than 17 different teams orchestrated by this process. More than 200 people are orchestrated by this process. So since the commercial area, the pre-sales, so if you look here, we have pre-sales, we have financial sector, CRM orchestration, implementation, project management, IT department to make the environment available for the customer. So in order to start the implementation, we need to have the system up and running, whether it be in the cloud or on premises. So in 15 days, you need to orchestrate everything to start the implementation. How we do that? Just by automating the process. So as you can see, this is a huge process. I'll try to share my screen so I can slide the process so you can see a little bit better. So now I'm alive on the system. So as you can see, when they start the submit sales order, I need to send to pre-sales to see what kind of participation the pre-sales team have. So these two activities goes to two different teams. Later on, I send to the channel analyst to review the sales order. There is some problem. Later, I send to the credit analysis, proposal analysis executor. So here I have many things that will take place. What is important here? The process is orchestrated. So when they submit the sales order, there is a form. So now what I have to orchestrate, I have to orchestrate the information I have. So when they submit the sales order, many documents you go along with that sales order. So this process, you orchestrate all that information and it will make it available to all those participants on the right time so they can analyze the content, so they have all the content available. Mike has mentioned about the integration. So here on this steps and this process, we have many type of integration. We can mention integration with content, because when you add the contract, the sales contract, so people need to analyze that sales contract and check with the sales order. In the end, the project team, they have to see the scope of the project, what needs to be implemented, so that there will be some description from the salesperson detailing the sales, detailing the components that will be implemented. So the project team, you have to look at that part of the document and see, oh, I have to plan the activities as a project. So all this orchestration is made by this process. As you can see here, there is a lot of icons. There is a activity and goes for this icon. These are messages. So when they get to certain point of the process, I need to trigger many parallel activities. So all those icon means message. So when they get here, the system sends a message and a different process start automatically. So the system is able to send message. So when it's okay and it's approved, so going to next step. So I start to use parallel messages. So those icons, they forward different sub-processes or parallel processes. As you can see, these light gray boxes are sub-processes. So as the complexity is huge, how we handle this complexity, we broke it down in small process, sub-processes. But not all of them are sub-processes. We have a full process that just they are waiting for a message from a specific process. So the process A will send a message to process B. When the process A send a message, okay, that's ready, you can start. So the process B start its instance to orchestrate different teams. So all this orchestration takes a lot of work, and it has to be on time. And people need to get message, and we need to control the deadline, because we have 15 days to get everything ready. So since the submit sales order and the starting of the implementation, the kickoff of the project, we have 15 days. So we cannot commit mistakes. So that's why this process orchestration using by SoftExpert is fantastic, because every activities, every box you see on that, they have deadlines. So people have, like, you have 2 days or 3 days, and when the deadline is up, if the person didn't finish the task on the deadline, the system can escalate, sending message to the leader, or so send the execution task for someone else. So this type of orchestration, you guarantee that you're going to finish the whole process in 15 days. I'm just going to slide it a little bit down. So you see that there is a lot of sub-process. So go to contract, legal department. The legal department has to check the contract to see if there is no problem with the contract. Also, the billing department need to issue the invoice. So different teams. This is a different workflow, different process, and so on. So when they got to the services, so let's see. So if I have everything correct before, so I have the invoice, I have the contract is okay, the sales order is okay, all the information is there. So I will start to plan the implementation, because I have 15 days, so I have to plan before. So what I have, so after this lane here is just waiting for the message. See this, you waiting for the message sent from here. So if everything went well, it will send a message to that part of the process, and this part of the process start the execution. But this is a sub-process. So let me explore a little bit that sub-process. So that is the sub-process that you trigger. So I have many activities, and I have here one thing that also Mike mentioned, the KPI, the key performance indicator. So this integration is crucial, because I'm measuring that. I need to measure such a process to see, to improve it, I need to measure, and I need to have this information visible. So if I look here, I have another sub-process, and I have this sub-process. So I'm going to the third level. See, I left that big process, Now I went to this sub-process, and this sub-process, you trigger a different process that you deliver the validation kit. That's a special one system. They need to be validated, so we need to use a different process to do the validation. So this is a sub-process, but what you look at here on this side is you have KPIs. So it is check if you are on time, the risks related to that process, the document. See, you have all the content, all the document on the process. So in other words, integration, integration, integration. So here we have a KPI that you measure the performance of your process. This KPI is related to the strategic plan that's related to customer satisfaction. So you are measuring the performance of your process to see if, this KPI is directly related to customer satisfaction. So it's connected to my strategic plan that it's increase the customer satisfaction level. At the same time, I can map and see all the risk on those processes. So I have the description of those risks here, and also I have all the content. So to get to those information, you just have to click in the system. You bring the risk management or the performance management component. So as you can see, there is a lot of orchestration, because when they look at risk, there is a different team that is responsible for dealing with the risk. So it's a different team that you be orchestrated, a different kind of instrument you're going to use in that orchestra. At the same time, we have KPIs, you have content. So this little box here, that's a sub-process, you can clearly see that is risk. This little bomb say there is a risk here. I'm measuring this with KPIs, and I have content documents here. So this is basically the orchestration of the process. And as you can see here, there is no link between those processes. There is no lane connecting them. All of them will start by messages. See, and when they finish, they also send messages to say, hey, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So every process you finish on this time and send a message. Here is okay, here is okay, here is okay. So people are playing the same music in different timing and rhythm, but you have this big orchestra made by the BPM component. But not the BPM alone. The BPM is just the one that's going to orchestrate. We have alongside with the BPM, the KPI that is performance management. We have the risk that are the risk management. We have documents because the process consumes a lot of contents, contracts, procedures, and many other information we need to handle on that. So I stop share for a while. Can I get back to my presentation? Carol, please.
Sorry, Jesse, just a sec.
Thank you. So look at, this is the form. So that big process, every activity you carry that form throughout the many areas, many people. So I'm creating electronic forms. So these forms are inside of that workflow. That workflow, you get all this information. So if you look here, you can add document to that form. So the sales order, the scope, the memorandum, and everything else you just add to the form. And the workflow, you get that information in the beginning of the process when they submit the sales order and orchestrate that information. Every single person that will be involved on that project, you have all the information available. You know how it is if you don't have all the documents you need to perform your activity. If you don't have the information to perform your activity, it's one of the biggest causes to interrupt a flow. So if you don't have the information, you cannot go ahead, you cannot proceed. You need to wait for the information. So in this case, the process carry on all the information alongside with the workflow. Here you see the GPS. This is a fantastic thing, because now I'm looking at the process alive. So when they start that process, I always can get back to that instance of that process, to that sales order number, and I can get the GPS. So the GPS says there is 2 tasks related. It's of that process, they are ongoing. So when you see this red dotted line here, it says where the process is at the moment. So at any given time, you can know where the process is, who is responsible for the activity. In this case, you have parallel, concurrent tasks. So you have task on this sub-process, and we have task on that sub-process. So behind it, so I can see that there's two sub-processes going on, and the process is here. So I know where I am. I'm at a given moment. So just type the invoice number or the project number or the instance of the process, and I can visualize the whole information, and I see the process at given time. Here I have project integrated. So I'm looking at the process activity, but on the process activity I have a association. It's small here, associated as a project associated. So that is fantastic, because this integration between process and project, because when the activity gets to the project manager, so he has to start the planning of the project. So you can use the same to do the project planning. So you break down that implementation on per module, per responsible for. So you're going to create and do all the planning for the project. And when your planning is ready, so after 15 days, you have the project planning ready, you have every resource allocated to the proper task. So you just play the button, and the system, you send emails, and you start to orchestrate all those responsible for the project activities. This integration between process and project are fantastic, because the process is a cycle thing, the project is linear. So when it gets to the project, so I start the implementation. So process integrated with project. I just can start to plan the project when they have all the information available. So the workflow, you guarantee that when you start to implement the project or to plan the implementation, you have all the information available. You have the scope, you have the number of hours that was allocated, you have the purchase order, and you can start to plan the project according to the schedule. Risk management. Now I'm showing a different integration. So what I have here, so the process, you need to identify the risk in your processes. So this is a different type of integration, because we have 15 days to deliver. Maybe you have a fine, or the customer may apply a fine if you delay on the implementation, or the implementation start, or you may have many different type of risks. So managing risk is a key factor to succeed. If you don't know your risk, if you don't identify the risk, so when the risk appear, you are in a bad situation. So now, again, integration between risk, process, and project. So for every activity you have in your process, you can identify the risk. So this is the risk you're going to identify. You can do the risk assessment. So per activity. So you can find and identify and treat the risk in your activities. And here you can see the KPI related to that activity. So you can see the gauge, the measurements, and you can check if there is some deviation on your processes. So now you are integrating performance management with process management. That's how. I have many more information to say, but that's, I guess, is enough. So what is SoftExpert Suite? It's the most comprehensive corporate solution for business process excellence and compliance management. So as you can see, this integration between risk and process, risk and project, process and project, process and content. This is all about compliance with many regulations. So you have the content, you have the planning, you have the information, and you have people orchestrated by the solution. Thank you guys for this time, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And I'm sure most of you attending would like the last video to be representative of the organizational integration in your businesses. I just wanted to recap with what Jesse shared with you. Jesse was brave enough to go and share with you a live demo of an example of a sales order. Now, I was told many years ago, nothing happens in business without a sale. And he also showed you that you could reduce by automating and integrating and orchestrating your business processes, saving your lead times from 35 days to 15 days. And you could appreciate what the benefits of reducing that from 35 to 15 days. He also showed you the sales order example. We had over 200 people integrated and automated across various disciplines within the organization in pre-sales, sales, audit, risk, legal, etc. And it's not very easy to do that with business solutions that are bespoke, that are not able to integrate into other systems. And Jesse touched a little bit on SoftExpert and the SE Suite. There are over 30 modules in the toolbox of SE Suite. And what we touched on today is business process management. And one of the beauties of this is that you preserve all your current investments that you have within your organization, including your ERP systems, your databases, your portals, etc. And you will draw using the SE Suite, BPM, and other tools that we have within the SE Suite without having to reinvent or reinvest in new applications. Just to backtrack, Mike touched on the why of BPM, and he used the term digitization and digitalization. And Jesse showed you a very simple demo of moving from why you should be doing this to how we actually go and assist you in your businesses to automate. He also used the term orchestration. And this is one of the key benefits of the SE Suite, is like a conductor in an orchestra with the various instruments and the players that you have, being able to orchestrate each one of those to the BPM tool that we have within SE Suite. So hopefully that gives you a very high level snapshot and an appreciation for the BPM tool within the SE Suite offering. Our next session is going to be focused on audit and risk, and we'll be communicating with you. I see there's a number of people that are attending today, and you've been on since the start of this, which shows that you understand and appreciate and have a need for BPM. But before we leave you, I'll hand over to Caroline to see if there's any additional questions.
Thank you, Dilly. We have several questions. I would imagine this one would be directed at Mike. Vawani asked, when is the right time to digitize processes? And do your processes have to be at a certain maturity level?
Thank you for that. How long would you like me to go on for? Look, very briefly, step number one, if you're at the beginning of your digitalization journey, you have a certain number of processes that you've started documenting. It may be just a few of your more critical processes, or it could be you're trying to kill everything with one stone, as it were. But very important, are you just digitizing, to put it bluntly, rubbish? Or do you need to take a step back and look at those critical processes and say, first of all, are we doing this right in the first place? So whether it's on paper in a quality manual or a procedure somewhere in the organization, Maybe you've scanned it in, you've stored it as a document in the system, which is sort of digitalization. But take it out the cupboard, brush off the cobwebs, because nobody follows those procedures anyway. Sit down, pull in all the stakeholders and say, guys, this affects all of you. Let's sit down and discuss this. Let's break it apart, let's kick it around, and let's decide on what are we going to do. So never mind the as is, let's look at really what we should be doing. And are we talking to all the stakeholders? Are we getting the risk people involved? Are we getting the financial people involved? Bring in a customer if it's a customer-facing application or process. Bring in the customer. How are we doing? What do you think about this? Involve all the stakeholders. Kick it around. Whiteboard it. There are many meeting tools available. You can do this during these COVID times. And then you decide, okay, this is the process that we now want to go with. So here you can start using a BPM tool, or I should call it rather an application that uses BPMN, Business Process Management Notation, along the lines of what Jesse showed you. So digitize that process, get it reviewed, and then get it published. There's a whole lot of training that needs to happen. There's some change management that has to happen, behavioral change. There's a whole lot of things that you have to do in parallel. So you can't just arbitrarily take a process and force it on everybody if it isn't working in the first place. So in a nutshell, that is what I would suggest. And that sort of answers the second question, when? Only when all the stakeholders are satisfied, they're prepared to put their signature, and we use digital signatures, by the way. Only when everybody's put their rubber stamp on it do we actually go and start now executing, using that process in the organization. Hopefully that has answered your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions, Caroline? We've got about 2 minutes.
So another question was about process leveling. So we saw processes, Jesse, for you being modeled at an activity level, but can the system model enterprise, value chain, processes, and sub-processes on multi-levels?
Yes, I just show a plain process. I didn't show the strategic map where I have the relationship between process and its strategies. I didn't show the macro process, but we have the macro process in one level, and you can drill down to the different macro processes, different levels until you get to the process itself and sub-processes. So yes, the solution is able to allow you to design different levels of macro processes. And normally you don't automate the macro process. Normally you automate the process and sub-processes. The only way to connect the levels are the different stage gates you define in your levels. So when you process start in the other one, or send a message to start the other one, this synchronization, it can be made in the macro level. But normally macro level is just to show the different levels I have on the process mapping.
Thank you. And lastly, if we have time, see we have a few seconds left, but what would be a typical transformation plan to get to orchestration level?
Jesse, you want to take that?
Oh yeah, yes, I can. So one thing that's very important is we have to look at your process. So the first thing you need to look at your process. You need to model and understand your process. So when you look at this NCO, I will have, if I automate that, I reduce the lead time, or I will save costs related to litigation or related to risk. So we need to first to understand the process. So first thing, I need to model the process and see how the SIPOC, the suppliers input, process and output of my modeled process. And then I can check and I can do simulation if I do like a automation, and what's the gain I have with automation. Normally it's a huge gain, but sometimes you're not going to have just gain in terms of time, but in terms of cost. And then you can look at automation for this process.
Thank you, Jesse. Unfortunately, Caroline, that's all we have time for questions this morning. But suffice to say that all the questions that you have, we would be more than happy on a one-on-one basis to meet with the individuals and the companies and go through in thorough detail regarding where they are, the as-is situation, and the transformation journey that we can help them map out to the to-be situation. With that, this brings us to the end of this morning's session. As I mentioned, our next session is going to be focused on asset and risk. Now, some of the questions that were asked related to strategy and purpose of the business. Just wanted to share within the SE suite, we have something called corporate performance management, where you set the corporate goals, strategy, etc. And Jesse touched on some of this, how you start integrating the rest of the modules ultimately to fit into the overall corporate performance management. And that includes multinational companies, individual companies, or global companies. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for attending and your interest, and we look forward to participating with you on a one-on-one. I'd also like to thank all the presenters this morning and Caroline for putting this together. Bye-bye.
SoftExpert BPM is a software for managing each stage of the process lifecycle, from modeling and optimization to automation, execution, and monitoring. This allows organizations to conduct their business more efficiently, responding to market challenges with faster and smarter processes. Quickly define your company's processes, creating intuitive flows based on the BPMN 2.0 standard. Simplify the development of business routines, building flowcharts according to your organization's methodologies, models, and tools. Map and implement your team's processes and activities with modeling features that facilitate and maximize productivity. Create business rules without any coding or programming, and eliminate errors and inconsistencies in operational procedures. Ensure the quality and efficiency of processes by creating dynamic forms that integrate easily with other technologies. The solution offers a complete platform to test processes and distribute information across the organization. Companies can run simulations to identify inefficient activities and make ad hoc adjustments, or create automations to eliminate operational bottlenecks. The software connects all hierarchical levels of the company so that managers can easily monitor the day-to-day operation. Automate forms, gaining fast and robust execution of processes. This means that activities can be started and assessed on different mobile platforms. Monitor activities, transfer tasks, and view process performance with a centralized control panel. Overcome deviations and ensure that process objectives are met. Follow the progress of activities through interactive portals. The company can analyze operational data, resulting in faster responses and allowing for safer decisions in real time. The solution allows you to share results with specific teams, improving collaboration and identifying opportunities. manage improvement cycles in any process, communicating indicators, goals, and essential results to ensure the success of internal projects. As we saw in this video, SoftExpert BPM is the perfect solution to manage and automate every stage of organizational processes. It allows corporations to easily plan, create, and monitor their businesses, making them highly efficient and agile. For more information, visit our website at softexpert.com or contact us by email through sales@softexpert.com.